Hi everyone, my name's Olive. Some of you obviously know me, some of you don't. I'm a student here at Cardiff, but I am also an animal rights and vegan activist. And so today I'm going to be talking about the intersection of feminism and the animal rights movement. And actually this is an area that I hadn't really kind of researched and didn't really think a lot about until doing this presentation. So I've actually learned a lot in the last couple of weeks preparing for this. So firstly, a bit of background about me and who I am. I went vegan in October of 2020, and since then I've learned a lot about the animal industries and what happens to animals trapped within them, and why consumers perpetuate these industries despite the fact that so many of us fundamentally disagree with them. I've learned that we as humans have quite a deeply problematic relationship with animals, and this has vast implications on the environment, but also on human health. So yeah, I began participating in animal rights and vegan advocacy. I've done quite a lot in the last couple of years. I started with kind of street outreach stuff, so like Cube of Truth style, kind of person-to-person individual activism, but I also set up my own pressure campaigning group in Berlin called Berlin Against Fur, where we were campaigning against the fur industry. I've done social media stuff as well, but my current kind of main project now, and what I'm doing with some lovely people in this room as well, is plant-based universities, which is it's an international campaign now, and it's calling on global universities to commit to 100% plant-based catering as a response to the climate and nature crises. So it's more of an environmental type project. You may have seen, some of you may have been there at the AGM in November and seen us there. It was quite an event, wasn't it? But today, what I'm going to be covering is, so how different forms of oppression are linked together, and specifically speciesism and sexism, and give you some examples of violence towards non-human animals, and specifically gendered violence and the exploitation of the female reproductive system in particular. And kind of maybe the running theme of this presentation you might want to be thinking as I'm going through is why you as a feminist might consider becoming vegan. Great. So the first question, and the first fundamental question, which I think is really important to answer, is this one: why should non-human animals matter morally? And to answer this, I think we have to think about the reasons that we grant each other moral consideration and we grant each other moral worth. We recognize that as humans, we share certain traits with each other. We are all sentient beings, which means we have the ability to experience feelings. We have the ability to suffer and feel pain, but also pleasure and joy. And we value our lives and our existence. Our lives matter to us. We know this instinctively. And we can also create bonds with each other and with those around us, and those bonds are very, very important to us. And so using these traits that we share, we kind of think about this and think, right, because we've all got these traits, we should then get basic rights, and we should be granted basic rights, such as the right to have autonomy over our own bodies, such as the right to live without unnecessary suffering or discrimination, and the right to be around those who matter to us. So now what we need to do is we've got these criteria. We now need to apply these criteria to non-human animals. And we know that non-human animals also share these traits. They are sentient beings. We have lots of evidence now on animal sentience. We know that they suffer and feel pain. We know that their lives also matter to them, and we also know that they can create very complex social bonds with each other as well. And I think anybody who's spent any time with animals at all kind of already instinctively knows this. I think this is kind of going through the motions, but I think if you have animals or you've spent any decent time with animals, this is kind of like, yeah, duh. I know animals can feel pain and suffer. So to summarize then, there's no trait that humans have which non-human animals don't possess, which justifies granting moral consideration to one and not the other. To put it simply, you should care about the basic rights of animals for all the same reasons that we care about the basic rights of human beings. It's worth briefly saying there are also bad ways to form moral worth. And I've just listed some on the board, but I'm sure you can think of many, many others. And we have numerous examples in history and ongoing issues, of course, where equal moral consideration hasn't been given to certain individuals because of their race or their gender or their sexuality or any other of these arbitrary traits. And that's basically caused some of humanity's worst problems in the past. So yeah, in practice, we've now concluded that animals should matter morally, but what does this actually mean? Well, I think this means veganism. Veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals. In other words, the way I kind of understand this is when we have a choice to reduce animal suffering, we should make that choice. And I think this is something that most people already agree with. And I genuinely do believe that veganism and being vegan is a logical extension of the morals that most of us already hold about animals. And these two words that I've put in bold, possible and practicable, are important, and I'm going to come back to those a bit later. So an important part of veganism is understanding speciesism. Speciesism is a type of discrimination similar to sexism or racism or ableism, where we treat members of one species as more morally important than members of another species. We live in this very strange world where we love dogs and cats, but eat pigs and wear cows, despite the fact there's no morally relevant difference between them that justifies discriminating against them in this way. And speciesism is so widespread that it's something that we are, taught from childhood. In fact, we don't even notice that we're being taught it. Most of us wouldn't even bat an eyelid when we see a child eating like a chicken wing, for example, right after cuddling a chicken at a petting zoo. And going further, speciesism is also reflected in the language that we use. We say beef and pork instead of pig and cow. We call animals livestock as if they're units of goods or commodities. And animal industries will use words such as destroy when describing how to dispose of injured animals. We would never use language like this when talking about companion animals like dogs and cats. It's also worth mentioning that women are degraded using speciesist language every day. Words such as these, cows, bitches, birds, are used to represent women as animals, reinforcing the fact that they are inferior and can be dominated, just like we do to animals in our society. So the next part of my presentation is going to involve delving into some examples of how animal industries exploit females and their babies in particular. The reason I've chosen the examples of female animal exploitation is not because what happens to male animals isn't absolutely horrific. It is. Rather, I'm hoping to show you guys that the exploitation and objectification of females isn't a human issue only, and it extends to non-humans too. And I'm also here speaking to an audience of feminists, so gender discrimination is something that everybody here I'm hoping would feel passionate about understanding and hopefully no longer contributing to it as well. The dairy industry, to me, represents this horrific crossover of animal abuse and the objectification of the female body. Like every female mammal, cows only produce milk when they are pregnant. And regardless of which humane washing labels are eventually stuck onto cartons of milk, certain practices within this industry remain the same across the board. Starting from around 15 months old, a female cow will be led into a confined space where a farmer will insert one arm into the cow's anus and another into her vagina, and then will use an artificial insemination gun to deposit sperm. This process is, of course, painful, traumatic, deeply invasive, and if done to humans, it would be called rape. Once she becomes pregnant, she carries her baby for 9 months, just like we do. But after the birth, mother cows are rarely given longer than 24 hours with their calves until they're forcibly separated from each other. It's not economical for babies to be kept with their mothers, since, the quite simple fact is the more milk a calf drinks, the less the farmer can sell. And cows form very matriarchal herds, and the bond between mother and child and mother and calf is extremely strong, just like the bond that we see between mother and child in humans. In fact, after the separation, mother cows have been known to cry out for days trying to locate their missing calf. And what you're seeing here is a mother cow actually chasing a van carrying her newborn baby. Female cows are only valuable to the industry for as long as they can get pregnant and produce milk. And after their milk producing ability wanes off after about 4 pregnancies, they'll be labelled as spent. Then their exhausted bodies will be transported to a slaughterhouse where their throats will be slit and they'll be sold for cheap meat. This industry relies fundamentally on breaking a precious bond between a mother and her child again and again and again. And when you purchase dairy products, you facilitate this psychological and physical abuse of female cows. Breeding sows are female breeding pigs in the pork industry, and they have one purpose, which is to produce as many piglets as possible during their lives. To ensure a sow becomes pregnant, most commonly she'll be locked in a mating stool and a farm worker will once again artificially inseminate her with boar semen. Then a week before the sow is ready to give birth to her piglets, she'll be moved to a farrowing crate. Farrowing crates are metal frames designed to only be centimetres larger than the sow's body. She'll remain in this cage for up to 4 weeks after giving birth to her piglets. And as you can see, she's completely unable to turn around. She's deprived of all of her natural birthing behaviours. And in the wild, sows actually build a nest in the weeks before giving birth. These mothers lie day after day amid their own urine and faeces, and they cannot interact with their babies. Pigs are incredibly intelligent and social animals, and it's very common to see repetitive stress behaviours and aggression from such intense confinement. And for context, in 60% of UK farms, these farrowing crates are still in use. And then just 3 to 6 days after her last litter has been weaned, it's time for her to get pregnant again, and the cycle continues and continues and continues. And once again, like the dairy industry, once she's no longer economically viable, she will be sold for slaughter. And 87% of UK pigs are killed in carbon dioxide gas chambers. This industry has reduced these mothers to piglet producing machines, basically. And this is well documented by this story that I found from last year, where a sow in Brazil gave birth to a record of 41 piglets. And ironically, I got this from a website called Pig Progress. But I don't think this shows progress. I think this shows that we as humans have managed to wickedly manipulate a female's reproductive system so much that she gives birth to such an obscene number of babies. To me, this is an absolute regression and a symbol of our utterly broken relationship with animals. The next industry I'm going to talk about is lesser well known, but really illustrates the point that animal abuse of females occurs at all stages of animal production. When humans get pregnant, in the early days of pregnancy, we produce a hormone called HCG, and pregnant horses also produce this hormone, but it's called ECG. E stands for equine. And this hormone is very useful within animal industries because farmers can use it to increase fertility in female cows, pigs, sheep, and goats. This means that there's a big profit to be made by pharmaceuticals companies in farming pregnant horses for their blood. This is illegal within the EU, but most blood farms are located in Iceland, Argentina, and Uruguay. What happens is the horses are once again impregnated, and then they are caged, and a tube will be inserted into their jugular veins to extract 5 litres of blood every day for 8 weeks in a row. And taking so much blood often causes the horses to tremble and have difficulty walking. Undercover investigations in these blood farms have uncovered violent abuse towards the horses and bite marks all around the stalls that the horses are kept in when their blood gets taken. Equine chorionic gonadotropin is only produced, as I said, in early pregnancy, so some farms will abort the fetus after 90 days of gestation, and this allows the farmers to then re-impregnate the mares so that 2 production cycles can be achieved in 1 year. And this is a really common theme with animal industries. Baby horses that do get born are considered very much a byproduct, especially if they're male, because they can't get pregnant anyway, so they're commercially useless. So much like male calves born into the dairy industry or male chicks born into the egg industry, they will end up being sold off or slaughtered. And once this hormone is then extracted from the blood, it it gets converted into powder and it gets shipped all around the world. And these products can be legally obtained in the UK from a registered vet. And examples of products which you can buy are vaginal sponges for sheep, which induce early lambing and have advertised benefits such as allowing farmers to realise premium prices for Easter lambs. In other words, we steal the blood of one pregnant mother, abort or kill her baby, then use her hormones to make another mother pregnant so she can give birth at a time of year where farmers can get the maximum amount of profit when they kill her children. To me, this industry is the epitome of abusing one animal in order to abuse another. And much like other animal industries, this is completely hidden to the public. People in Iceland didn't have any awareness that these blood farms even existed until the Animal Welfare Foundation did an undercover video on television. And the wool industry is another one that I want to talk about today. Female sheep in the wool industry often undergo a particularly invasive and painful procedure called laparoscopic AI. And the reason it's done is because it results in more reliable conception rates than regular artificial insemination. Laparoscopic AI involves strapping a female sheep to a table with her legs separated, penetrating her abdominal cavity with a laparoscope, and then depositing semen directly into her uterus. The sheep are usually given a light sedative and pain relief. However, according to the RSPCA, laparoscopic AI is an invasive surgical procedure, and penetration to the abdominal cavity causes pain and results in inflammation and distress. Interestingly enough, this procedure was actually banned in dogs in 2019 by the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons and is now considered prohibited under the Animal Welfare Act. So in other words, you'd be breaking the law if you did this procedure on a dog. And it now falls under a category called mutilation procedures. This is another perfect example of speciesism at play. We've granted such different moral worth to two different species, despite the fact they're both sentient individuals capable of feeling the same pain. And despite the fact that sheep can live to around 14, they will all die at a fraction of this age in a slaughterhouse when their bodies are no longer profitable. The examples I've given here today are from 4 completely different industries: dairy, pharmaceuticals, meat, and fashion. But what I hoped by choosing 4 different examples is that to show you that female exploitation is ubiquitous in systems of animal exploitation, regardless of the purpose that the animals have been bred into existence for. I mean, I haven't even mentioned zoos or entertainment or sport or animal testing, but of course female exploitation exists there as well. The general theme is that for the short time these mothers are alive, their bodies are pushed to their limits, their children forcibly separated, often murdered, and then when they themselves are no longer profitable, they will be murdered as well. Everyone in this room, and generally people who live in high-income countries such as the UK, are fortunate enough to live in a time where we no longer have to exploit animals to survive. And unlike before in history, we don't live in a situation of necessity anymore. We can not only survive, but we can actually thrive now without supporting and facilitating industries that harm animals. However, it is really important to mention that this is not everybody is in the same situation. Some of the world's most vulnerable people, including pastoralists, especially in very low-income countries, rely on keeping and ultimately killing animals for their survival. And it can't be denied that animals provide nutritional value in diets that lack diversity, which is particularly important for pregnant women and children, of course. And for some people, owning animals is the only possible income stream, and this is very important for women in countries that have laws that prevent women from actually owning their own land. So in situations of necessity like these, where we're really talking about a survival situation here, it is justifiable to put the rights of humans before that of animals. And as I mentioned earlier when I spoke about the definition of veganism, it contains these 2 words, possible and practicable, to include such situations where it would not be possible to survive without some form of animal exploitation. But this isn't the situation that we find ourselves in. There is no justification for facilitating animal abuse when you have the choice not to support it. And as well as that, health organisations globally, including the NHS and the American Dietetics Association, have clearly stated that everyone at all stages of life, including during childhood and pregnancy, can meet all of their nutritional requirements on a well-planned vegan diet. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, animal ag represents 14.5% of all human greenhouse gas emissions globally. And this is greater than the whole of the transportation sector combined. Animal ag and fishing are leading causes of deforestation, water pollution, biodiversity loss, and transitioning to a plant-based food system would help countries like the UK achieve and reach our climate goals. According to the United Nations, gender inequality and climate change are connected, and women and girls experience the greatest impact of the climate crisis. When climate disasters strike, women are less likely to survive, more likely to be injured due to long-standing inequalities in information, mobility, decision-making, access to education, access to resources and training. And extreme global heating increases the incidence of stillbirth. The increasing spread of vector-borne illnesses such as malaria, Zika virus and dengue fever are linked to worse maternal and neonatal outcomes. The effects of animal agriculture and fishing on the climate crisis, and by extension on women and girls, is something that we must take into account. Sometimes when I do outreach, people ask me why I don't support human issues instead. Or someone will say something like, I think the oppression of humans is more important than that of animals, therefore I won't be vegan, or I won't cut down on my meat and dairy consumption, or whatever. And this was well illustrated a few months ago when I commented on a recipe page on Instagram where someone was using a dairy product, which could easily have been swapped out for some kind of vegan alternative. I said, make it vegan, the dairy industry takes mothers away from their babies. And someone replied to me, yeah, so does human trafficking, do something about that too. But to me, this comment kind of completely misses the point. Because because generally we support one social justice issue, doesn't mean that we can't support others as well. And social justice issues aren't mutually exclusive. You can fight for multiple at the same time. And what's more, we shouldn't be belittling anyone's activism because someone else perceives another issue as more important. So going back to this example, just because this person may deem human trafficking to be a more serious issue and more worthy of their time than the abuses that are going on in the dairy industry, doesn't give them a free pass to purchase meat and dairy products. And the great thing about veganism is that you can stop paying into systems of animal oppression just through your purchasing power. And of course, you can spend the rest of your days and the rest of your time fighting against other injustices that you care about as well. So, I can be anti-human trafficking, a feminist and a vegan all at the same time. I don't have to pick and choose. Systems that deem certain lives more worthy than others are the root of all forms of discrimination in our society. And whether that discrimination is among humans or non-humans, it doesn't matter. Because as we established at the beginning, animals deserve moral consideration for the exact same reasons that we do. Non-human animals are individuals, their lives matter to them, and we have choices which can reduce their suffering, and we have these choices every single day. And as I hope I've demonstrated with the examples, a fundamental part of animal exploitation involves mothers and females and the objectification of the female body. However, there's one quite important point that I want to make, which is this. Non-human animals deserve to be treated well in their own right, not because their oppression happens to resemble a certain type of intrahuman oppression. I think that's a really important thing to put on there. So as you leave here today, have a think about perhaps the following questions. Firstly, does your moral consideration for the rights of sentient beings extend to non-human animals? Secondly, are you being morally consistent? And thirdly, are there changes in your life that you can make from today to become more morally consistent? And finally, I'm going to put this powerful quote on the board. It's an animal rights activist called Dallas Rising, and in this piece, she's speaking about her experience of being raped and why she actually uses it as part of her outreach. Being raped hurts, Having your reproductive choices taken away from you hurts. Having your babies taken away from you hurts. It doesn't matter if the victim is human or not. It doesn't matter if the violence occurs in the 19th century or 20th century. It doesn't matter if the victim is the legal property of the perpetrator or not. It's all painful. Thank you very much.